Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Nick toko ingoa. I live here on about 2.7 hectares of land in the Wairarapa, where over the past 5 or so years I've been striving towards forming a deeper connection with my kai. And I've done this through learning to grow vegetables in a vegetable garden and a food forest for fruits and nuts, of course without pesticides, and also learning to raise livestock as well for the animal products that I consume. We've ticked over into December, which means it's officially summer in the southern hemisphere here, and man, it certainly feels like summer at the moment. It's really hot. We've had some really high temperatures. The days are really long. It's still quite light, even late in the evening, and you can just feel the buzz of all the insect life and like the dry stalks of grass that are coming up, that we're definitely getting some heat now. It's been a kind of unusual spring, which I know is a strange thing to say because when spring is ever usual anyway, it's characterised as being up and down. But I mean it in the sense that while we've had some really warm weather, which kind of tricks you into going, oh cool, get everything out and we can plant it, we've had some really late frosts. We've had the latest frost I've ever had since living here, which was just a few weeks ago on the 18th of November. And it's kind of been a blessing in disguise that I've been a bit slow to get my summer seedlings out, because it's meant I haven't had the bulk of them out. We've had that cold period and those frosts hit. So I've been able to just cover the few I've had out with like sheets and plastic covering, while avoiding a huge amount of vegetables just getting ruined. When I plant in my summer seedlings, what I normally do is just chop and drop anything alive on top of the surface of the soil, and then I'll lay some wet cardboard over top of that. It's important the cardboard's wet, otherwise if it's dry it can actually act as a water retardant, which isn't great in the summer. And then I'll add a layer of organic matter such as some cow manure, then some compost, and then once I've done that I'll add a carbon layer such as straw, give things a good water, and then add my seedlings in. And that way I've got this really thick layer of organic matter on top of the already existing soil without disturbing it too much. So that means all the biology in the soil can be really happy and then come up and, you know, feed on the new life that I've added with my compost and everything else, and the plants can use the carbon to make their main structures as well. At the moment it's kind of a bit of a gap period in the garden. I am harvesting like the odd cauliflower and cabbage still, and I even had the experience of having the first new potatoes the other day, which were absolutely delicious compared to the just the flavourless, floury, watery ones we've been getting from the supermarket on this off season. So having that early potato variety is like a completely new thing, just really buttery and delicious. I have all my main potato crops in the ground. I use 3 varieties. Desire, which is a variety that stores quite well, Agria, and Rocket, which is the early potato. And I made a video about how I'm saving seed potatoes each year so I can just replenish that cycle and not have to buy any in anymore. And the potatoes have all come up quite nicely, and I'll be harvesting a lot more of the Rocket very soon, I would say. Man, that's crazy. I actually had to just stop recording and put my phone in the freezer because it said it was overheating and couldn't be used at the moment. So I guess that's an idea of what summer's like so far. I'm also getting close to doing a garlic harvest. So my garlic probably hasn't worked out the greatest this year, and the reason being I didn't plant as many cloves as I normally would, and I just got really time poor and probably just got a bit lazy, and I probably didn't have enough organic matter in the beds as I should have as well. Garlic need a lot of food to really get going, and kind of if you give them that good start you can pretty much leave them to it. The only thing I'd typically do is maybe give it a little bit of liquid fish fertilizer or something like that every now and then. My garlic's got rust like it gets every single year, which is a fungal disease which affects the alum family. It's on my spring onion a bit too, but I don't really stress out about it too much anymore. It's there, but I still end up getting good quality cloves from it, even though the rust comes in. I've found that planting the garlic a little earlier means it has time to grow a bit more before the rust sets in. At the moment, all the classic summer vegetables are just sort of establishing themselves and focusing on growth at the moment. So in this heat, my one job is just to try and give them a bit of water when I can. I don't typically overwater and really look after my plants. And this is because I want them to be able to kind of fend for themselves so I can be a bit lazier. And that way, when I save the seeds the following year, the ones that make it are the ones that are going to be more suited to this climate as well. So they've only been in a few weeks and they're not much to look at the moment, but I am starting to get some steady growth. So I'm really happy with how like the cucumbers and tomatoes are looking. I'm hopeful the capsicums and chilies will pick up a bit more soon too. The one thing is the eggplants don't look super great at the moment, and I think this is just a crop that really values water, which I'm not very good at. And I think as well next year I won't plant some of my early summer seedlings as early as I did in the winter. So I think delaying it a month would be fine, because when I compare, say, like eggplant and capsicums a month apart, there's not a lot of difference. And even the ones maybe planted earlier did slightly worse because they probably didn't have that daylight length to get themselves established enough. It was still quite cold, and it's just meant they're sitting in the same pottles for longer. And then otherwise I'm giving a few melon varieties a go again, so honeydew, rock melon and watermelon. I tried a few watermelon last year and didn't get anywhere with them, so it's a bit of a learning curve at the moment. And then I've got the pumpkins and corn and a few beans that seem to be humming away quite nicely. In amongst my garden, I try and have flowers and other support species, so I've got like parsley, seeding in there that's attracting beneficial insects. I let all my brassicas go to flower to attract the bees. I've interspersed marigolds, and with the tomatoes, which are meant to help deter pests for them. I've got zinnias, which are beautiful and bright, and hopefully will grow a bit more to attract beneficial biology into the garden. Just the idea is if I can get as much variety and abundance as possible, it'll mean my garden's a healthy wee ecosystem. The food forest really needs a bit of a mow. The grass is so tall at the moment. But the fruit trees are all looking pretty good, and we're starting to get into that territory, maybe not yet, where they're going to be old enough to really start producing fruit for us. So I can see a number of apples on the apple trees. This is the first year the apricots actually has fruit on it as well, after like 4 or 5 years. So it's probably still in the early phases, but it's really exciting that we're getting closer to them really giving us some abundance. We sadly lost our cat Winnie, and so it's the first time in a while we haven't had a cat on the property. And look, it's a funny one because the consequence of that is we've had a lot more difficulty with rodents this year, and we've also had a lot more blackbirds and thrushes and things like that. Now the rodents I can definitely go without, but the blackbirds and thrushes I have a mixed relationship with. In some ways they can be incredibly destructive, ripping up seedlings, digging up your garden, and they've really been trying to feast on our strawberries and raspberries. So I have netted them, but even then they will still try to get in and take out those strawberries and raspberries. I've even left some uncovered to go, you guys can have this, just let me have my share. But I'll still find the a-holes, inside the netting, despite having their own free patch for themselves. My hope is also that they'll forage unwanted insects and bugs and things. And in their defense, I have seen thrushes with snails smashing them against the driveway. So they are doing that job. So not sure how I feel about the increased amount of those blackbirds and thrushes at the moment. One really cool thing this year is that the harakeke is flowering. My understanding is there's no, well, scientists don't know the rhyme or reason to why it flowers some years and not others. Probably we'd be best turning to Māori, the indigenous people of Aotearoa. But I think this is only the second time it's flowered the whole time we've been here. And so it's really cool because it means we've got a lot more tui around this time of year than we normally would. So now I'll turn to the animals that we have here on the farm. So I did it. I got cattle again. So this was something I felt really mixed about doing, but I decided to just follow my gut instinct in the end and get them. I've made a personal decision where I believe my diet and health is best when I am consuming some animal products. And I like to have a bit of variety in that regard. And so beef hugely adds to that variety in mine and my family's diet. I've also got a toddler and, they're fussy. So you want to, have as many options as possible sometimes. I was torn because there are a whole lot of cons to getting cattle. And the biggest con for me is probably the slaughter process. And I don't mean the home kill process, because I talked about it a few years ago in a video of raising cattle. That part's actually really nice and really good. Yeah, it's emotional and it's heavy, but you're there connected with the animal. And when our cattle beast that we consumed died last time, Cunny, he was really calm and relaxed and at peace. He died in the environment he knew without any fear or suffering. And I know because I saw it and I witnessed it. And it's great to be there at his death and then have that gratitude and connection when I was eating the meat that came from him. The part of slaughter that doesn't sit well with me is the animal that we don't eat. So we're never going to get one steer, because they're herd animals. They need a mate. They don't like to be by themselves. But we're never going to consume 2 cattle beasts at once either. So at the moment in New Zealand, we can't sell, our home kill. Like, I couldn't kill both and then sell on the other cattle beast. Even though when I do the home kill, I get a specialist to come in and do it for me, and I get a butcher from down the road that have their own facilities and obviously have to adhere to their own hygiene and safety standards as well, because they're literally selling meat from their butchery that they've processed there. So it's a little bit frustrating where it feels like you're left with the only option to send them to the works or the slaughterhouse, whatever you want to call it. And that's the process that doesn't sit well with me, because with number 10, a few years ago, the cattle beast we didn't eat, he had to be loaded up onto a transport truck, which is scary for them. He had to even travel 4 hours to get to the place he was going. And then he would have been penned up. He would have been in an environment full of the smell of fear and death and everything. And yeah, while his death was probably pretty instantaneous, the lead up I don't think was very good at all. The other aspects too are, of course, like the environmental side of things. My cattle emit methane, a potent greenhouse gas. I can't deny that. It's not the same carbon footprint as raising cattle in American feedlots, where their food, that they are fed has a huge environmental consequence as well. The cattle beast I eat, the only transport he will do is the one from the farm to come to here, and then he'll be killed on site. He's eating and roaming a grass-fed diet. He's not overgrazing. His manure is actually adding to the soil biology and soil life, and therefore helping the soil's ability to sequester methane and carbon. So I'm not trying to say, look, this is a net zero carbon footprint or whatever. Well, maybe I can, because I can say I'm planting trees, but I think that's a load of rubbish anyway. But, it's better than it is. And the alternative is, feeling like I'm making health sacrifices. So it is a tricky one, and I don't claim I'm doing the right thing or I know exactly what to do. but this is just the decision that feels like it fits best with me at the moment. So I'm never very creative with my steers' names. Their names are Black and Brown because one is more black and one is more brown. And they're cool boys. I love cows, I really do. They've got such neat personalities. I'd say Brown is the more bolshy, brave one who's keen for a lick and a pat, whereas Black's the one who's a little bit more keen to just sit back and watch. One thing I've loved watching them do, particularly over the spring, is just go absolutely nuts with the spring pasture and spring weather. They bolt down the paddock and they chase all the sheep and freak them out, but it's just such a hilarious sight to see them running with their ears pricked back and their tails in the air as they're chasing the sheep. I'm sure the sheep were happier without them being there, but they're learning to coexist. Now, in saying that, there is the other downside to cows. They are intelligent and very good at escaping, and I've had my first disaster with them. So I was gone from the property for under 24 hours. This is always how it happens. And I returned to find that the cattle had broken through an electric brake fence and 2 steel bottom wires from another fence. So they pushed through 2 fences and were then free roaming the property. It looked like they'd killed one of my mulberry trees that was growing very well. Thankfully, it looks like it's coming back. And it was really weird to me and bizarre, but the only thing I could think of was maybe the neighbours let off some fireworks and it absolutely freaked them out, because I was thinking like, oh, is there a dog that came in here or something? That also leads me to talk about what's been happening with the sheep. So we have Wiltshire sheep, which are a self-shedding breed. They're low maintenance, you don't have to crutch or dag them or anything like that. I also came home to our dead pet lamb Nani, so she had died somehow. And prior to that, we'd also recently lost another wether who looked like he was seizuring too, which also happened to happen while we were away and had someone else looking after the property. The universe loves to time things like this. And it's a real mystery as to what's happened to them. And I've talked to a few farmers, and most of them sort of shrug their shoulders and just go, look, sheep die sometimes, and don't think too deeply about it. I guess my leading wonderings is if it's staggers, where they've had like pasture that's too rich all at once and had maybe a mineral deficiency like magnesium, or if they ate something that was poisonous to them in too larger quantities. So I don't know exactly why poor Nani and Mateman died, but it was a bit worrisome to see 2 die in such a short amount of time. So I've been really carefully break feeding as well, so they can't get a huge abundance of too much rich pasture at once, but that obviously didn't seem to be enough. So what I've done since is give them a mineral block that especially has magnesium in it. Not all mineral blocks have magnesium in them. And so the cows and the sheep can lick away at that. And it's probably just coincidence, but I've had no other casualties since they've had this block. So then lastly, the final animal we have on the farm are our Orpington chickens. And they're of course going through their broody phase of the year where they try and have little bubbers. And I've been reflecting on this. I honestly don't know if I'd get Orpingtons again as my preferred variety of chook. They're beautiful birds, and I think they've been bred to be show birds, and they are a heritage breed, so a really old breed, but I can't say they're the best mothers. So often they try and go clucky or broody, and then they just stuff it up, by smashing eggs, by going off for too long and making them go cold. Yeah, I don't know. There seems to be issues with that side of things for them. And saying that though, our hen Geralt has had amazing success. She has successfully hatched 9 chicks, which I think is a Braidwood record, which is really good. And saying that today, I had them out. I always do this and I expect this because I feel so bad for them being cooped up in a cage. I like to let them have periods free roaming even when they are young, and so mum can have a bit of a dust bathe. And there is one unaccounted for. And normally I keep a pretty good eye on them, but maybe I'm wondering, just when I happened to go away, a hawk got down and snatched one. I don't know, so she's down to 8 now, sadly. And then our other hen from last year, Onyx is her name, she's currently got 2 little bubbers that have hatched. A few have failed as they've been hatching, and I can hear another egg cheeping, so I think one more is on the way. So well done, Onyx, you're doing a really good job. Hey, it's Nick from A Future Time Point. Unfortunately, as I was editing the video, disaster struck, and I stupidly let the chicks out again. I feel so bad keeping them in this cage, but the hawks got onto it now, and now we're down to 7 from 9 of Gerald's babies. So it's a real shame, but you can just really take no chances with the hawks. What's also happened, I think, is Onyx's chick got through this little hole here, and I also heard a commotion, and now she's only got 1. So it's really unlucky, but I've got it in a new area now with her 1 remaining chick. An issue I've recently had in the chickens, and it was with Gerald earlier in the season, and another one, is they got what's called sour crop. And what sour crop is chickens have a crop, or a gizzard, whatever you like to call it, where the food enters this kind of pouch, and they eat little bits of stone and hard material to grind and digest up the food that they eat before it goes into their stomachs. And what crop is a fungal infection that can affect this area, which can be caused from maybe food having the fungi in it, or unsanitary conditions. My hypothesis is I tried them on a new food, and maybe this food wasn't stored correctly and got a bit damp, and therefore encouraged the issue to happen. I was reading as well as the real signs of sour crop, which my chooks had, are you'll notice first thing in the morning before they've eaten, this area still feels inflated, even though it should be empty. And that's because it's not digesting properly, and there's a lot of gas inside of it as well. You'll also notice that there's a sour smell on their breath too, as you squeeze it. So the best thing for it is to use oral thrush medication, because it's antifungal and works on the same thing. Look, I don't like to give my animals much in the way of medicine, only when I feel they really need it. So I tried all the natural remedies like apple cider vinegar and garlic and everything else like that first. But if I feel they really need it, and I feel as an animal owner I have a responsibility to do my best to alleviate their suffering, there are some instances where I do just have to use it. And I was giving that to the hens that were affected 3 times a day for about a week. And what I did have to do on top of giving them the Nilstat medication was actually drain this. You've got to be very careful about that. So tipping them upside down and gently squeezing this pouch to get as much of the fluid out as possible. Chickens can't cough things up really or spew up, and so it's important to only tip them up and do this for like brief periods of time, because if they try and inhale, there is a risk they could get something in their lungs and then get a secondary issue like pneumonia. So it's important to carefully drain the gizzard and then keep them off food and water for 24 hours is what I did. And then that means this is really empty, and happy to say it completely cleared up. And of course, as a result of that, they're no longer suffering. Gerald's lived, and Nara's had 9 chicks as well. So yeah, it was good to learn that animal husbandry skill in terms of that kind of common ailment that can affect chooks. So spring was really busy. I'm behind like always, but I'm trying not to fret too much about it. Things are in the ground now, and things will gradually grow, and I've got plenty of kai in the garden for the summer ahead. I'm really looking forward now to this holiday season and the days being long, and really enjoying the summer weather. It's a beautiful time of the year in its own regard, and really important that I try and make sure I'm out in it as much as I can. That about sums up really what's going on in early summer on Braidwood Farm. I like to make these little videos just to journal and document what happens year to year, because it's really helpful to reflect back on the learnings. So if you did make it this far, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful summer. Haere rā.